Just surround yourself in good stuff. Surround yourself in white light and just let the BS go. Let it go. It's doing no good. All it does is feed the dark side, and it feeds the darkness in you. Around you is all pure white light. There's so much good stuff around you. So when I try to tell people that the physical harm you do to yourself by living in the darkness, you know you're here for a reason, and so am I.
Today's conversation takes us into a space most people either dismiss or sensationalize, but rarely sit with honestly. Not just ghosts or hauntings, but the unseen forces that shape our lives every day. The energy we carry, the weight we leave behind, the darkness that feeds on anger, trauma, and disconnection, and the light that protects, heals, and restores. My guest today is Paul. He's a U.S. Navy veteran, a Native American holy man, and a spiritual warrior who understands darkness, not from theory, but from lived experience. From early encounters with the spirit world to near-death experiences to decades of clearing homes, land, and people of destructive attachments, his work lives at the intersection of faith, discernment, and responsibility. Rooted in both his native traditions and his Christian faith, Paul walks the path of a Hayoka, a sacred mirror, and what he calls a hollow bone, a conduit through which light moves when it's needed most. He doesn't chase darkness. He doesn't romanticize it. His work is about protection, about balance, about safeguarding the soul. And his book, Mysteries at the Wyndham Inn, isn't just a ghost story. It's a case study in how unresolved energy, trauma, and intent can imprint on places and people, and what it actually takes to clear it. In this episode, we talk about what darkness really is, how it feeds, how it disguises itself. We explore how to tell the difference between spiritual interference, emotional trauma, and psychological suffering, and why faith, grounding, and personal responsibility matter now more than ever. So whether you believe in spirits, energy, or simply the power of unresolved emotion, this conversation invites you to listen beneath the noise, to what's influencing you, shaping you, and calling you forward. I'm your host, Ryan Olekson, and this is Beyond 80%. Paul, welcome to Beyond 80%. It is so great to have you here today.
I'm gonna have to call it 81% after today. I'm gonna knock your ratings up a bit.
Oh,
right?
That's the energy I love. Love it.
Here we go.
So
Here we go, Ryan. Let's have some fun.
You have such an interesting background. You've lived many lives. A Navy veteran, a Native American holy man, a spiritual investigator. So tell us, how did these worlds come together into the path that you walk today?
That's a long story. Hindsight, it's been a hell of a life. I started out as someone who was brought into a family that didn't really like me much. I had a crazy stepfather. By the age of 14, I had enough of getting the crap kicked out of me, so I pushed back enough that cops came for the final time and separated us. And I was homeless at 14, in the military at 17. They tried to kill me a couple times. So after 6 years of Navy time, they retired me from injuries. And when I went into the VA system, good Lord, a veteran post-Vietnam, retired from the military on injuries, and then trying to figure out how to have a wife and family and all that with no real parenting behind me. So everything I've done, I've got to say my successes are truly in the hands of God. My failures I own. I've never blamed anybody else for any of my lots in life, and I never will. I've never complained about getting hurt in the military. I volunteered. What do you expect? You're joining the military. What do you think? I'm a warrior at heart. Over the course of my life, I had to come to the realization that I'm a spiritual warrior, and everything that's happened to me in my life is preparing me and has prepared me to do spiritual battle with whatever great spirit puts in front of me. And he's put a twinkie or two in my path.
So let's go back to your first spiritual encounter. Talk to us
first one?
about, your first real encounter with the paranormal. What made you realize from that encounter that this was your calling in life?
When I got hurt real bad in the Navy, I watched those, I was floating above the submarine, watching them fish my body out of the ocean. I was 30 yards above the boat, watching it, and I was at peace. I was happy, didn't feel any pain, right? I could sense my spirit guides off to the side and see everything was going on. I understood death, but I already knew it. It wasn't the first time that I was in that position. My spirit had left my body a number of times prior to that incident in my late teens, early 20s. When I was a kid, I knew things that people just don't know. And I mean that in a sense of I know what people are thinking. I know when they're lying. I know when they're full of shit. And I would call out all adults. You got to think back to how life was back in the 1960s, 1970s. You tell a grown up something that somebody else doesn't like to hear, you're going to get a backhand. I would call my stepfather out all the time. The most vivid memory that I have, woman that was always around crazy. And when I say crazy, I'm talking about the stepfather that I had to deal with, for the bulk of my young life. And that's why it steps to crazy. That he had this woman around her. She wasn't causing me harm, and I didn't feel that she was. But as a child, if you're seeing a ghost, and this woman's in a nightgown, white nightgown, and there's knife holes in her and blood all over her, and she was always doing this. She was always pointing, at crazy. So as a kid, I saw this, and it's one of the first memories I have because it was, what is this? What is this woman, and why is she hanging around this guy? Well, I could see the darkness around him, and as a small child, I don't understand it, and I can't tell the difference between what's the difference between real darkness and a woman who's full of blood and got knife holes in her, and telling me mentally that he killed me, and she wanted to be found. So I don't know if she's ever been found or not.
Did you ever figure out who she was?
Anytime I went down that hole, you can imagine the blowback. Imagine being 3 or 4, to be honest. The first time I actually said it, they said it just like that. Who's the woman you killed? And she's right there, and that took on a pretty good beating. But I've seen things. I dream my whole life, always have. Sometimes I would go to bed trying to solve a problem, and it would come to me in the middle of the dream, and I'd write it down. And my poor wife's like, "You living in crazy land again?" But
So this is something that you've had your entire life. It wasn't necessarily like a moment where you started to feel and see these spirits.
no, I'm kind of the opposite. It's almost like I was a spirit wondering why everybody else can't. It's like normal to me. Then it became abnormal. I've always been more comfortable with the spirit world than the world of the living.
When you started to realize that it was abnormal, as you said, did you try and avoid it or push it
Oh, yeah.
down or anything like that?
Oh, I spent a significant amount of time doing everything I could to keep it at bay. I didn't want anything to do with it. Again, it's because it's progressive, right? You see this stuff, and then you're told your imaginary and so on and so on. And I would talk to my mother about it. And she had gifts because of her Native American, connections, lineage. And I knew that. I knew that at a very young age. She would talk a little bit about it, and then she was in the Catholic faith and kind of know what happens when you get Christians messing around with people who can talk to the spirit world. They frown on that stuff.
The one thing I want to go back to, your Native American heritage, is it sounds like your mom didn't necessarily bring you up with those traditions and that heritage. So is that something you found later on in life?
No, as a matter of fact, we were heavily engaged in the Native Americanism. That was back before the casinos came around, but not dramatically before. When I went in the military, the casinos started coming around with bingo, but they weren't the full-blown stuff that they are now. That just shifted everything. I was away from crazy and my mother, and I never really went back. She let it be known that we were forbidden from following through with what we were, the tribes we were with when I was young, because when I was young, we used to go to powwows, and I got around a lot of Native Americans. Loved it. Loved the powwows, loved the drums, loved the culture, and it feels like home to me. And then by the time I was homeless and then in the military, I still had it and I still followed it, but nowhere near like I did when I picked it up at a point down the road. Same thing with Christianity. The church in my hometown always felt a draw to it. And then when I was in high school, I was dating this girl that had cancer, and I was in the church with her, and I could see this angel. I didn't really know it was an angel then. I knew it was powerful. And I was talking to her, and I was asking her for help to heal this girl. I was a little emotional. When I saw the angel do what the angels do, it was pretty wild.
So you had both Native American culture and religion as an influence in your life. So I was wondering, how did those two cultures conflict in just what you thought about the world and how you thought about yourself?
The crazy part is it never conflicted with me. It only conflicts with outsiders looking at me, right? And again, even the people I went to high school with, They can't comprehend or couldn't comprehend how I could be Native American and be Catholic. And grown-ups living still can't. And it's because people just don't understand. To me, it makes perfect sense. And the marriage of my beliefs as a Native American and what I believe in the Christian faith, Catholic to be more precise, there is no conflict. And here's why. I don't follow faith the way the average person does, right? They either read the Bible or they go somewhere and somebody tells them how to interact and so on and so on. I've never conformed to that. I've always come at it from a why position. The priest sits there and says, if you don't blah, 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 you're committing a sin. I'm the guy that looks at it and goes, why is it a sin? That's what I was thinking of this guy when he said this. This priest, probably about 29, 30 years old. He's standing there and he says in front of a couple hundred people in his church, if you don't pray for the priests in this parish, you're committing a sin. Oh my God, I almost lost my mind because I had enough. I wanted to tell this guy, what are you doing to people, man? Don't tell me what I can or can't, what I should or shouldn't.
Can you explain what the bone is and how you're a conduit for that?
First and foremost, I have no power other than who I am, but I do have the ability to connect with, talk to, see the spirit world. And the way it works is the spirit world needs living bodies to channel through, to move through. So that's what I am. I'm a hollow bone. The ability to funnel God's light, the spirit world's white light through me to do what needs to be done. Healing, knowledge, wisdom, information. The basic tenet of a shaman or a holy man is, the go-between the spirit world and the living. But it also is my ability to move that light and bring the forces to bear to remove darkness. So the simplest way to say it through a Native American way is to be a hollow bone. I learned that phrase studying Chief Fool's Crow, who was a phenomenal medicine man. He always referred to himself as a hollow bone.
I'm so curious about the spirit world and how you describe it. This is something we spent a lot of time on in the NDE series. Would you describe the spirit world as just another dimension?
If you want to use dimension, then it's multiple dimensions. It's like layers, you know. In the ocean, if a submarine wants to hide from surface or aircraft or other submarines, there's layers in the ocean, permalayers. So there are different filtrations, different temperatures. You take the sub and you slip in and out of these things, and it masks whoever's chasing you. To me, the spirit world is similar to that. Where are you on the spectrum? So, like when I look at people, where's your vibration or your frequency? Darkness is a very low vibration. Jesus is an extremely high vibration. So people living on this planet are somewhere between here. Okay. And that's why they're here, is to learn lessons and raise your vibration. And the modern term is leveling up. You do things you're supposed to accomplish in this life, you get to level up, which means you're raising your vibration, you're learning lessons. So the other side is the darkness doesn't want you to keep moving towards the light. The battle of good and evil is as real as it gets, and they're pushing back as hard as they can to keep you from leveling up. And that's the fight. And when I watch people come out and take another step forward, I know that they're going to get slammed.
So, I mean, humans, we can range between higher vibration, lower vibration. So, if I'm angry, I'm in a lower vibration. If I'm in a state of joy, I can be in a higher vibration. So, we have a range, right,
That's true.
within ourselves. So, when it comes to spirits, what is a dark entity versus a light entity?
In its general sense, a dark entity will have a low vibration, and a white light being, an angel, a white light entity, will have a higher vibration. The higher the vibration, the more power. With that school of thought in the mind, if a high vibration entity tries to move its light through something that isn't ready, you can cause tremendous harm. You'll just burn it out. And that's what happens with these computers when I get too much energy going. So I have to keep pulling myself back down to stop all that power from spewing out of my soul, right? And all the spirits that are channeling through me to answer your questions and so on. A dark entity is the opposite. It's got low vibration. So the purpose of walking your path in life is to learn lessons and raise your vibration. They're really doing their best to screw with us.
With these dark entities, would we classify them as dark evil souls. That's a lot of the time how they're classified in movies and TV.
I wouldn't say soul. Most of the dark entities that I bump into are not soul related, if you will. But their whole mission is to capture your soul. They want your power. Every day, multiple times, I declare that my soul belongs to Great Spirit, the baby Jesus, and with the white light warriors of the universe. It is not for sale. It's not open. When I drop dead, my soul goes back where it's supposed to go, and that's with God. And I pray to them constantly to protect my soul. You got your physical, mental, spiritual, and emotional bodies. Those are the four corners of our existence. But your spirit and your soul are two different things. When I've been dead before, my spirit left my body. So when people go through trauma, their spirit will separate themselves from the physical body. It's to preserve the integrity of your spirit while your physical body deals with the trauma, whether you're in war, combat, you're an abused child, you're going through abuse from family members, or just whatever traumas there are in life. People get sick and die, and it causes other people so much trauma that their spirit will leave to protect itself.
So this is when people say they have an out-of-body experience or they feel disconnected from their bodies.
Yes. Okay, Granddaughter Crow does a great series of lectures on this type of stuff where the reasons and the whys behind your spirit leaving to protect itself and preserve itself. Same thing with your soul. When I was getting on my red road, I had to go through a series of rituals that pulled my soul parts back together so that my soul could be one again. I've been through so much trauma that my soul literally split off, and pieces of it went places to preserve itself so that if I didn't survive, a piece or pieces of my soul would live on.
And so when we kind of go back to this difference between spirit and soul, how would you define the soul?
So your soul is everything that you are, all your lives, everything you've ever learned. Look at it as your hard drive, right? From the time you bought the computer until everything is in that hard drive. That's your soul. To me, your spirit is more about this lifetime, the spirit of who I am in this lifetime, who you are in this lifetime.
I want to go to your book for a second. In the Mysteries at the Wyndham Inn,
Dun, dun,
you write about
dun.
you write about hauntings and dark entities. So from your experience, what actually creates a haunting or dark presence in a place or even a person?
In book 2 of the Mysteries of the Wyndham Inn, okay, I talk about this ghost who paces in front of the post office, which is right next to the Wyndham Inn. This is a real place, not too many miles from where I live. It's closed now, but it's becoming a museum. Anyway, this grumpy old man, the main character, his name is Master Gary. Now, the characters in these books are real people. So are the ghosts. Now, the main narrator is a ghost. So the main character, Master Gary, his name is Gary Jackon. I grew up with him. A handful of years ago, he showed up and said, "Hey, I got to talk." And he starts telling me about the Wyndham Inn. His story was very compelling, how he would have these dreams that he was being attacked by this black cat when he was living at one of the apartments at the inn. And he would wake up and turn the lights on, and there was no cat. But historically, the fire department, volunteer fire department, the state police have been called to this building countless times for noises in the walls and cats trapped in the chimney and so on and so on. When Gary's telling me the story, he would say I'd wake up and I'd be fighting this cat that wasn't there. And if it wasn't for the scratches on my body, I would have thought it's just a dream. But it happened too many times. Now, here's what happens. When people talk to me, they tell me what's going on, especially when it's traumatic. They pump so much energy into it that these bubbles pop up for me. Okay. And I can see what they're seeing in their head. So as Gary's telling me this, I can see this cat attacking him. And then almost quickly I can tell, oh man, that's bad juju. I very rarely say it, but that's how the book came to life. All the characters in the story are real, actual real people who have told me what happened to them when they lived there. And then the ghosts. I talk to the ghosts and they tell me their version of what happened. So back to your question, how do people become ghosts and so on? So in book 2, there's one piece in there about this grumpy old man, and he's driving this 1970s classic Chrysler boat that gets 8 miles to the gallon. But he was in retirement age. He was in his 70s and so on, but he was just a grumpy bastard. And he couldn't stand Master Gary. And he would come to the post office every day and he'd interact on occasions with Gary, but He hated him. He hated his motorcycle. So all he would do is spout dark, dark, dark. Ah, you guys suck. You know the kind of grumpy old man I'm talking about? Well, this dumb bastard is spouting off as he gets out of his car, goes to drop his mail in the mailbox, and he's just spewing anger. And this dark entity was trying to attach to Master Gary, but this white light being came in and knocked it back. Well, this dark being wants its feed. It wants to eat. So as soon as it realized it couldn't get Master Gary, that dope of an old man just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. So it moved over until it could attach to it. And it attached to the old man, and he died within 30 seconds. From the walk to the mailbox in front of the post office, which was only 20, 30 feet, to his car, he walked, okay? He's searching for his pills for his heart, had a heart attack, died in his car. Well, the darkness lassoed his soul, but his spirit got away. Darkness wants your soul. This is your power, your soul. This dope is now pacing back and forth in front of the post office, spewing the same garbage. He doesn't know he died by a dark entity. The paramedics declared it a heart attack. But I know what happened. The ghosts that are there know what happened. Okay. So now he is a spirit, a literal spirit without a soul, just pacing back and forth. And that's where he's going to be until somebody can release his soul from captivity.
Couple questions here. So these dark entities, you said that they feed. What exactly are they feeding off of?
So everything that we are is energy, everything. And you have to accept that premise to try and understand how this whole thing works. The science community has proven that energy never goes away, it just shifts. Here's my position of what a poltergeist is. A poltergeist is a lot like a tumbleweed. Have you ever seen a tumbleweed get created? I don't think anybody has. All you see is the desert, and all of a sudden you see these balls of twigs blown across the landscape, but you never see little baby ones, right? They always seem to be the same size. It's where the hell did they start? I like to use a tumbleweed as an example of how a poltergeist comes into existence. So let's take you and your husband. You and your husband, let's just say, have this magical theoretical fight, okay? And you're going at it, and you're both as pissed off as it gets. And that angry, mean, dark energy that you're producing is coming out of you. It's coming out of your husband. And you're going at it. So imagine a house full of people. And every time you have a dark argument, what do I mean by a dark argument? I mean where your intent is true, where you're really pissed off, you're mad, and you're generating all this energy. Well, it's also power. Where does that energy go when an hour passes and you come out and you kiss and you make up? Where does that energy that you guys created go? Well, I know where it goes because I can see it. It splashes right on the kitchen floor and then just sits there. So when I go clear houses and clear land and so on, there's so much gunk out there. So you do that once and you've cast an ounce of darkness into a pile. Let's just say it's that big. Or the first stick of a tumbleweed, okay? 2 days later, your problems didn't get solved, and all of a sudden, finances come into play, and you have an argument. And this tumbleweed starts falling, starts getting kicked around, and then another stick is picked up. Okay, a week goes by, or the next month comes along. The arguments, they just keep recycling themselves. Well, all that dark energy that you are creating just piles up until it has enough where it can start interacting in and of itself. Anger is a powerful, powerful energy. When you do this enough, it collects. And over time, it'll keep growing because you don't do anything except spew it out, and it collects all around your house. Look at it as a dust bowl or a tumbleweed. It starts blowing around, and it starts collecting and coordinating until it's a 3-foot wide tumbleweed blowing across the prairie. Once it gets to that stage, it develops a conscience. It develops an ability to do things like throw things across the room. I'll give you a great example. Not sure how this particular poltergeist got a hold of me and got in the house because we had a lot of protection up. But one night, some years ago, I go to bed and I'm spoiled. My wife comes in, tucks me in, fluffs my pillow, gives me a nice kiss. And so 5 seconds, 10 seconds, she's out of the room. And all of a sudden I hear crash. And I yell out to my wife, "What was that?" And she goes, "The iron plate that's above the stove just got thrown across the room. You know those iron chunks of plate that you have for cooking? Well, this thing got tossed, a good 8-9 feet across the room and not hit the floor and bounce. I mean, it was tossed. So I'm like, I don't feel like dealing with this. So I just say, I'll deal with it later. All right. Well, the next day I got up and I had to take care of that. But when that energy that we create gets enough energy, it creates it has the ability to morph, just like science tells us. Never goes away, it just transfers into something, another form. Well, if it's built by anger and hatred and bitterness, that's what it knows. If it's built by love and light, that's what it knows. If you pump a child full of nothing but hatred, the probability is that kid's going to have a lot of hatred. If you pump a kid with nothing but white light, the probability is that that kid will be a white light, living person.
Is it fair to say that that energy turns into that poltergeist, which turns into that dark entity that now is attracted to the same type of energy?
So I would say yes, although I've never seen it happen. What I have seen happen is that ball of darkness is looking to feed higher level demons, tricksters, and so on. So they can come in and just grab a hold of that thing if they want or feed off of it. So that thing will plug into a person who's pumping full of dark energy, kind of like the grumpy old man, right? Every time he spews out that hatred, it's not the words that he's saying that make it dark energy or negative energy. It's the intent. When you look at something and you feel that intent within you, just by giving somebody that evil eye, you're kicking out that energy in that direction. Whether you say anything or not, words have power. It goes to your intent. Again, like praying. When you pray, the spirit world looks at your intent, not so much your words. So when I look at people, I see their intent.
How do you tell the difference between something spiritual and something psychological or emotional?
For me, it's easy because I can feel it. So I feel what people feel. And when people are sad, I can feel it. They're happy, I can feel that. When they're confused, I can feel that. So I can tell the difference between mental illness and what I can feel as their emotions or the energy that they're feeling. So I do a
Yeah.
lot of work with vets, and anger is our go-to emotion as a vet. In the military, anger is the emotion that motivates. If you need somebody to pick up a weapon and charge a hill, you got to put the fear of God into them and you've got to build that relationship around you.
Yeah.
So, why did God put me through all these things? Just like the military, if you're going to send a warrior to do your bidding to protect people, country, constitutions, whatever you're protecting, you want to make sure those warriors are as trained as they can possibly be so that they never get into a situation that surprises them. If God's putting me out there to be a spiritual warrior, I would expect God to put me through the gauntlet so that I and you, God, will, and all the spirit guides around me, will know that I'm not going to quit.
You mentioned something interesting, and I've heard this theory from others before about that perhaps mental illness is not necessarily a defect of the brain or a result of trauma, but more so a spiritual fracture within a person. If it's truly this scientific thing that we do in Western society where there's a chemical imbalance in your brain and that's what it is, or is it more so more on that spiritual side of things?
So, where we go sideways is when we are out of balance. Now, for me, I had to go through all the PTSD with the military and the VA and all the drugs, and finally, I said, "This is bull. There's something else here." And I got off all that crap, but I had to go through that so I could have the conversation with vets. Same thing with the drinking and so on. I had to go through all that so I would be able to truly understand what others have been through. So, how does mental illness play into that separation? For me, when I work with guys or gals that are struggling with mental health, we have to address this thing in fourfold: physical, mental, spiritual, and emotional bodies, the four corners of our existence. We have to get these four things into alignment and balance. We have to learn to ground and connect. That's the core fundamental of attacking physical, mental, spiritual, or emotional issues, period. And you have to figure out how to find your way in each one of those things. A vet that I worked with for well over a year, the last piece for him is the spiritual piece. And I had to clear him and clear his house because he had a trickster in his house. And, it was isolated because his wife is a big Christian. She brought a lot of white light to bear, which kept this thing kind of at bay. But I had to clear it out of there. Navy vet is borderline an atheist. I go in, my wife and I do this clearing. We blow all the stuff out of there, pack up this demon, get him out of there. As soon as I cleared it all out and brought white light back in to bear on the property and then protected it and so on, this flock of birds came in and surrounded the house. Okay. And the wife starts crying. Now, she was almost crying because I had said to her, listen, if it's all right with you, I got to call in from the circle of love and put some hugs on you. Is that all right? Because I knew she needed it. She was struggling when I was clearing her. She said, yes, please. And it wasn't 5 seconds later that she was surrounded by white light beings giving her hugs. Oh my God, her knees buckled, goosebumps everywhere, had to hold her up. She turned around, she goes, I can't believe this is happening. I can see it, feel it, sense it. So she was having a very religious moment. That caught his attention. But when we pulled everything out of there and the house got brighter and the birds came and the wife said, that's the first time birds have been in our yard in years. And I said, that's cool, huh? And you could hear them chirping away and everything else. And I said to her, I go, have you tried to bring them in? She goes, we gave up years ago. We used to do seeds and everything else. We couldn't get any birds
Wow.
to come back in our yard. So for him, that was just enough when I said to him, now your last piece is you have to find some kind of faith, something greater than you and so on. Again, I don't promote a particular church or any of that, but you have to figure it out. Well, he did. And he started going to a church. Still don't know which one, but it's not the same one as his wife. But every Sunday he goes 11 o'clock mass. So he found his path. He understood enough of the work that we did over the year, okay, where he understood I've got to maintain this balance. And maintaining that balance helps him with his mental health. Now, is it completely cleared up? Nope. I encourage him to continue to get therapy, mental health therapy, for the rest of his life, or as long as he feels he needs it.
So you go into these homes and you do these house clearings, and you've mentioned several different types of categories, like tricksters or demons, or maybe that tumbleweed, that poltergeist is sitting there. When you walk into a house, how do you know who you're dealing with? Which type do you know that you're dealing with?
I don't. It takes time for me to acclimate. My wife and I were I was looking at a property with my wife 10 years ago. And it's an old farmhouse with a lot of land. When I got to the property, our youngest son was with us, who has gifts, but he's going to need time to understand. So we're at this property. I'm just being a normal person, right? Or trying to be normal. And as we're looking at the outside, and we're kind of walking around, this hawk just circling above, and he starts screaming. And I look up and I'm like, all right, something's going on here. Because hawks are messengers for me. They kind of watch me and so on. At first, I'm like, he's just saying hello. And he kept circling, kept screeching. Something's up. So I started pacing, putting myself in that spirit mode. And as we opened the door and stepped into the threshold, I can feel it. My wife's one step behind me and she goes, oh shit, there's something dark here. I can sense the heaviness, but she instantly knew it was, a trickster, probably a low-level demon. I don't think it had tremendous power. I don't want to downplay it. I don't want people thinking that a low-level demon isn't dangerous. Tumbleweed's dangerous. Now everything's up, and all of a sudden it's quick, and I'm like, I should have listened, right? I should have listened to the hawk warning me. And as I kind of look around, now I'm looking for my spirit guides. Okay, and now I'm calling them forward, and I can see one of them just, whoever told you you were getting days off, right? That's what I'm hearing in my head. Probably my own words, but the look on one of my guides' faces was like, hey, stupid, this is your life, so buckle up. There was a pretty dark entity who had cords attached to 2 children, and this third thing that I still haven't figured out. And then we backed up out of the house. This old lady, part of the family, was in her 90s. She comes hobbling down the driveway. And I looked at her and I said, hey, Minnehaha, right? And this poor woman almost turned 4 shades of purple, stopped dead in her tracks. How did you know my name? The spirit world told me. She goes, nobody's called me Minnehaha in 50 years. So I said, oh, that's nothing. Who got murdered in the house? Oh my God, the realtor was purple. This poor lady. Nobody was murdered, she said. Somebody was shot, but they weren't murdered. I'm like, oh, okay.
As you're talking, a lot of this sounds scary. So, I could imagine when people hear darkness and they think of only fear, but some of the stories that you've talked about today, darkness seems like it can also teach us. How do you kind of explain that?
I want to be very careful. I don't want your listeners to think that finding darkness is going to help them learn something. To me, darkness is like all the rest of lessons in life, but darkness won't forgive because it doesn't have that ability. You can learn a lot from darkness, but be careful of the lessons you're learning, because if you learn them the wrong way, they're never going to leave you. Your mission in life is to learn and advance your soul, but your priority is to protect your soul at all costs. Your body's nothing. Dying's easy. Living is hard. But if you die with faith, your soul is protected. This is why you see all the time these priests giving last rites and so on. But if you don't get that last rite, you may be stuck. And again, I've seen it. You're lost. I mean, I've seen this where people just keep moving. They're dead. They instantly are dead. And their spirit just keeps going. And they don't know any better. And they're just caught and looking around. Or they just keep moving in this circle or this straight line.
What is a story that still sticks with you today and gives you chills?
So, in a moment of sheer stupidity, where I'd really had enough, I used my free will. Okay. And when people question whether or not they have free will, well, I'm telling you, you have free will and don't mess with it. I chose to use my free will to tell all the white light beings around me, it's enough. I said, enough. Take it all back. I don't want any more of it. As soon as my intent was clear, remember, intent, as God is my witness, I watched my gatekeeper, my main spirit guide, drift back. I mean, literally, right out of the movies, just drifting back. And as he did, I could feel the rest of the white light beings around me drifting back, but I can see him. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Okay, he's drifted back. And I can feel this void, this vacuum starting to be created around me. It was like the bubble of protection had left me. And as it did, this serpent thing comes slithering through the window and right around me. It's got the face of an eel, and it was black. I could taste it. I could smell it. I could feel it, and I could hear it. I wasn't using words, but I could hear it. And it was coming from my soul, and it was on a mission. I'm talking about a microsecond of how long it took from the second I said enough and they drew back to this thing slithered through and was coming at me. And by second 7 or 8, I learned my lesson. I have never felt so much raw, pure evil, hate. If that was purgatory, I tasted it. And man, did I back up quickly. I don't know how you can pray and apologize any faster than I did. And I begged for Archangel Michael to come in and thank the baby Jesus, along with my gatekeeper. They swooped right back in. And there was a spiritual battle right then and there because that thing wasn't giving up because I had made the mistake of declaring my intent to be free. So it took time to build that up for them to push back. And it took a microsecond for the darkness to come into that void. Man, that fight was something to see. But as it got taken care of, as they came back, and I can feel that envelope of protection, and it cleansed me. And that was it. I've been absolutely committed to my red road and my faith, and no more doubts. Everybody has doubts, but especially with what I do, you can't lose your faith.
As I'm thinking about this story, if you hadn't called that protection back in, I would assume it's this would be a life where you lost faith, you have hopelessness, and if you allowed that serpent entity to stay there, how do you think that would have played out? How does that manifest in a person?
I would have been dead instantly. I doubt that darkness would have allowed me to physically live. It would have killed me in the course of coming in and taking my soul. But just like the old man, the grumpy old man, it didn't take him long to lose his soul because he had forfeited all his protection.
And what about people who have bad intent, like murderers, or they're just walking around trying to hurt people? Do you think that's actually who they are and the vibration they live in, or is this a situation where an entity might be attached to them through a cord?
3 things. This one is hard for most people to understand. In order for people to learn lessons, bad things have to happen to them. Okay, so this is where the conversation doesn't play well in general public. Okay. So the answer to 1 is that there are people here to do bad things that are here to teach others lessons. If you dig down deep and you start understanding that we come here with a plan, and in the course of that plan, we've already agreed to certain things, like living causing us tremendous harm. Then there's the people that are encased in darkness, possessions, or just caked in countless bits of evil. So you can have a piece this big that's just pure evil. Doesn't do a lot to you, it just makes you feel bad. But when you have 100 of them or 1,000 of them like bugs just stuck to you, it can control you. And then there are just pure evil people. That rat bastard stepfather is a gray entity. I assumed he would be, in the pits of hell, but he's not. He is a gray entity. So when I clear anything, I'm always saying, Great Spirit, clear, cleanse, and remove any and all negative, dark, or gray energies or entities. Because a gray entity is kind of one step below a real dark entity. Mm-hmm. But that's who he is. In order for him to, not be a gray entity, he has to figure out how to do enough white light work to overcome all of that karma.
So one thing I hear all the time in mainstream culture is this idea of spiritual warfare going on. And I know there's a ton of different rabbit holes around this idea, but it's essentially that, there is this war going on outside the purview of humans, and it's to get their souls. Do you give any credence to that?
1,000%. We could do a dozen podcasts just on spiritual warfare. Without getting into a political debate, look at what's going on in the world. Look at what's happening with the three so-called major religions. Look at how divided everything is, almost right down the middle. If you step back and you look at this, how is the world hanging on by the shoestring it is? And if you look at it from the dark side, you're like, this is never going to work. But if you look at it from the light side, you'd say, this has got to work. So spiritual warfare, there is so much literature out there, not just through 2,000 years of Christ teachings, but thousands of years of historical record of the earth. Again, you got to get outside the box and look at all the information and draw your own conclusions. For me, I've been in the spiritual warfare battle since shortly after I was born. But to be in a position now to be called to remove darkness or to confront it, I had to go through all of that. I'm a fundamentalist in the understanding of the spiritual warfare that we are ingrained in every single day. For the most part, people don't pay attention to it. They're not really aware of it. And they walk around oblivious. I watch people walk through ghosts, past ghosts, spirits all the time. I watch people open their mouths and say things that I can see a spirit is telling them to say, and they have no clue.
Do you think that this is a very specific time in the world and that this is progressing into a heavier spiritual battle going on?
Yeah, so if you look at the Mayan calendar, right, 2012, the world's going to implode. Everything's going to, listen, in its basic sense, 1,000 years of peace will come for all those beings who have raised their vibration high enough to move on to the next plane. Everybody with a low vibration is going to stick here and keep bitching about the same things over and over and over and over again until they stop blaming everybody else and start accepting things and make the decision to learn, advance their soul, and move away from darkness. I got this guy I was in the Navy with, great guy. I've all but blocked him because he can't get past certain things. And it's like, man, find the positive in everything. People that stay at this vibration are terrified to get out of their comfort zone. Fear comes from the unknown. I used to fear the things I could see and sense. But once you can see where the source is and you know what it takes to stop it, the fear goes away. Same thing with dying. I don't fear dying. My wife wants me to stick around for a long time, but yikes.
Well, hey, you got a lot of work to do, so
I don't want to downplay the spiritual warfare piece. Anybody that's listening to this, stand in the light of Christ or whatever it is you believe in on the positive side of the spectrum every single day. Just surround yourself in good stuff. Surround yourself in white light. Let the BS go. It's doing no good. All it does is feed the dark side, and it feeds the darkness in you. Around you is all pure white light. Okay, so there's so much good stuff around you. So try to tell people the physical harm you do to yourself by living in the darkness. You know you're here for a reason, and so am I. But in part, I'm here to be a conduit, to be a hollow bone, and to be able to do God's great spirit's bidding by going out there, attacking darkness, and helping white light beings and the living deal with the spiritual warfare that is plaguing this globe.
I think that's a perfect place for us to end this conversation today. Paul, thank you so much for joining us and talking with us and giving me so much, and I'm sure all of our listeners, things to think about. I really, really appreciate your time today.
Well, if you liked me, then make sure you give this young lady a bunch of likes, bunch of clicks, and reach out to her and tell her to have me back on. I got some more wild stories to go through.
Thanks for listening to Beyond 80%. Make sure to hit subscribe so you never miss an opportunity to learn, question, and evolve. If you enjoyed this episode, the best way to support the show is to share it with someone in your circle, a friend, a colleague, anyone who's ready to think a little deeper. Until next time, I'm your host, Ryan Olekson, and this is Beyond 80%.